When exactly were you planning to pick them up? I asked my daughter, staring at the two sleeping children on my couch and the packed diaper bag that looked like it could last a month. The question hung in the air of my living room, heavy with something I couldn't quite name yet. My daughter Brianna stood in my doorway, her car keys already in her hand, her body half turned toward the parking lot as if she were already mentally gone. She had that look on her face, the one she'd perfected over the years, the one that said she was about to ask me for something while making it seem like she was doing me a favor. "Mom, I told you. Derek and I have that conference in Seattle. We'll be back Sunday night, Monday morning, at the latest." I looked at my two grandchildren. Little Marcus was 4, curled up with his thumb in his mouth, and baby Zoe was barely 18 months, her tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. I loved them more than words could express. But something about this whole situation felt wrong, and it had felt wrong for months now. "You told me you needed me to watch them for a few hours this afternoon. You said Derek had a meeting and you had errands. Now suddenly there's a conference in Seattle?" Brianna let out that familiar sigh, the one that made me feel like I was being difficult, like I was creating problems where none existed. She walked back into my apartment, closing the door behind her with exaggerated patience. "Mom, I literally texted you about this last week. Did you even read my messages?" I had read every message. There was nothing about Seattle. There was nothing about a conference. There was a text asking if I could watch the kids on Saturday afternoon, and I had said yes. That was all. "Show me," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Show me the text where you mentioned Seattle." Brianna's face flickered with something, annoyance or maybe guilt, I couldn't tell which. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through our conversation with quick, impatient movements. Then she stopped, stared at the screen for a moment, and shrugged. "Okay, so maybe I forgot to send that particular text, but I definitely meant to. Mom, this is really important for Derek's career. His company is sending him to present at this huge industry event. I can't just stay home with the kids while he goes alone. What kind of wife would that make me? What kind of wife? Not what kind of mother. Not what kind of daughter. What kind of wife? And you just assumed I would be available for an entire weekend without asking me first? You're always available, Mom." The words came out so casually, so matter-of-factly, as if she were stating an obvious truth about the weather. "You're retired. You don't have anything going on. And you love spending time with your grandkids. I don't understand why you're making this into a problem." "I don't have anything going on." The phrase echoed in my head like a bell tolling. I was 64 years old. I had spent 38 years as a registered nurse, working night shifts in the emergency room, holding the hands of dying patients, missing my own daughter's school plays and soccer games because someone else's crisis always came first. I had retired 2 years ago, finally, blessedly, and I had promised myself that this chapter of my life would be different. This chapter would be mine. But somehow, in those 2 years, I had become the permanent on-call babysitter, the emergency backup plan, the convenient solution to every childcare problem my daughter and her husband encountered. "I had plans this weekend, Brianna." She actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut through me like a scalpel. "What plans? Book club? Your little walking group?" "Mom, this is Derek's career we're talking about. This could lead to a promotion that would help us finally buy a bigger house, get the kids into a better school district. I think that's a little more important than whatever you had planned." I looked at my sleeping grandchildren again. They were innocent in all this. These beautiful babies who had no idea their parents viewed me as nothing more than free, unlimited childcare. They didn't know that in the past 6 months, I had watched them an average of 4 days a week. They didn't know that I had canceled my trip to visit my college roommate in Florida because Brianna had forgotten to arrange alternative care during their vacation. They didn't know that I had missed my own sister's birthday dinner because there was always an emergency that required my immediate availability. "The diaper bag," I said slowly, walking toward it. "Show me what's in there." "Mom, what are you doing? This is ridiculous." I unzipped the bag and started pulling out its contents. Diapers, yes, but not a weekend's worth. There were at least 50 diapers in there. There were 2 weeks' worth of formula. There were enough changes of clothes to outfit a small army of toddlers. There was Zoe's special blanket, the one she couldn't sleep without. There was Marcus's favorite stuffed dinosaur, the one he carried everywhere. This wasn't a weekend bag. This was a moving bag. How long is this conference really, Brianna? Her face had changed now. The casual dismissiveness was gone, replaced by something harder, more defensive. She crossed her arms over her chest and lifted her chin, that gesture she'd been making since she was a teenager and got caught in a lie. Fine. 2 weeks. The conference is 1 week, and then Derek wants to take a few extra days to explore the Pacific Northwest. We've never been. It's supposed to be beautiful this time of year. 2 weeks. She had brought my grandchildren to my 1-bedroom apartment without asking, expecting me to care for them for 2 weeks while she and her husband went on vacation. And you weren't going to tell me. I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right moment. I knew you'd overreact, just like you're doing right now. Overreact. I repeated the word slowly, testing its weight on my tongue. You call this overreacting? You show up at my door, drop off your children with a bag packed for 2 weeks, lie to me about the duration, and I'm overreacting? You're retired, Mom. You have nothing but time. What is the big deal about spending 2 weeks with your own grandchildren? Most grandmothers would kill for this opportunity. There it was again. That phrase. You have nothing but time. As if my retirement years were just empty hours waiting to be filled by someone else's needs. As if I had worked for nearly 4 decades only to become an unpaid servant in my own life. Most grandmothers are asked, Brianna. They're consulted. They're given the courtesy of making a choice. My daughter's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw the name on the screen, Derek. Her husband was probably waiting in the car, engine running, ready to leave for the airport the moment Brianna finished depositing their responsibilities on my doorstep. Look, Mom, I don't have time for this. Our flight leaves in 3 hours. Can we please just talk about this when I get back? No. The word came out of my mouth before I fully realized I was saying it. But once it was out there, hanging in the air between us, I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been wound tight for years began to loosen. No? Brianna looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. What do you mean, no? I mean no. I will not watch your children for 2 weeks while you go on vacation. I was not asked. I was not consulted. I was ambushed with a lie, and I'm saying no. You can't be serious right now. I am completely serious. Mom, our flight leaves in 3 hours. What are we supposed to do? Miss the trip entirely? Derek has been working toward this presentation for months. That sounds like a problem you should have considered before you assumed I would be available without asking me. Brianna's face was turning red now. I had seen this expression before, usually when things didn't go her way. When she was 5, it meant a tantrum was coming. When she was 15, it meant she would storm off to her room and not speak to me for days. But she was 36 now, a grown woman with children of her own, and I had expected, foolishly perhaps, that she would have outgrown this pattern. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've done for you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything they've done for me. I wanted to ask what exactly that referred to. The Christmas gift cards I received once a year? The occasional dinner invitation that always seemed to coincide with needing me to babysit afterward? The phone calls that only came when they needed something? Tell me, I said, keeping my voice steady with effort. Tell me what you've done for me that makes me owe you unlimited babysitting without notice. We bought you that new coffee maker last Mother's Day. A coffee maker, $60, maybe $70, in exchange for what probably amounted to hundreds of hours of childcare over the past year alone. If I calculated it at minimum wage, they owed me thousands of dollars. But I had never asked for money because I loved my grandchildren, and I had made the mistake of thinking that love meant I could never say no. A coffee maker doesn't entitle you to my time, Brianna. Her phone buzzed again. Derek, getting impatient. She glanced at it, then back at me, and I could see her calculating, figuring out how to manipulate this situation back in her favor. Fine. What if we pay you? Would that make you feel better? We can give you, I don't know, $100 for the 2 weeks. That should cover any extra groceries or whatever. $100 for 2 weeks of round-the-clock care for a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old, less than 50 cents an hour. That was what my time and energy were worth to my own daughter. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? Seriously, Mom, I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to ask me, before you make plans that depend on my availability, I want you to pick up the phone and say, Mom, we're thinking about going to Seattle for 2 weeks. Would you be willing and able to watch the kids? And I want you to accept that my answer might be no. Brianna threw her hands up in the air. You're being completely unreasonable. What grandmother says no to spending time with her grandchildren? A grandmother who also has a life, I said quietly. A grandmother who has spent 64 years taking care of other people and finally wants some time for herself. A grandmother who loves her grandchildren desperately but refuses to be taken for granted. The sleeping children stirred. Marcus mumbled something in his sleep, and Zoe's tiny fist closed around the edge of her blanket. Looking at them, I felt my heart crack a little. I wasn't rejecting them. I would never reject them. But I was rejecting the role my daughter had assigned me, the role of convenient, disposable, always available childcare. You know what, Mom? This is exactly why Dad left. Time stopped. The air in my apartment turned to ice. I stared at my daughter, this person I had raised alone after her father walked out when she was 7, this person I had sacrificed everything for, and I felt something inside me die. What did you just say to me? I said, this is why Dad left. Because you're impossible. Because everything has to be on your terms. Because you can never just go with the flow and make things easy. He told me that once, when I was 16 and I visited him in California. He said you always had to make everything complicated. Her father. The man who left in the middle of the night with nothing but a note that said I need to find myself. The man who sent child support checks sporadically for 3 years and then disappeared entirely. The man who showed up when Brianna was a teenager, suddenly interested in being a parent now that the hard work was done, filling her head with stories about how difficult I was while he took her to Disneyland and bought her expensive gifts. Your father, I said, my voice shaking with an emotion I couldn't quite identify, abandoned us. He left a 7-year-old girl crying at the window, waiting for a daddy who was never coming back. He let me work double shifts at the hospital while you ate cereal for dinner because I was too exhausted to cook. He missed every birthday, every graduation, every important moment of your childhood. And you're going to stand in my home and quote him to me about why I'm difficult? Brianna's expression faltered, just for a moment. But then she recovered, armoring herself again. He changed. He's different now. He's convenient now. He sends money for the kids' birthdays and calls himself Grandpa Dan on social media. But when you needed someone to actually raise you, where was he? When you had the chicken pox and I had to take unpaid leave because I couldn't afford childcare, where was he? When I missed my own mother's funeral because your school called saying you were sick, where was he? That was decades ago. And this is now. This is you, my daughter, standing in my living room, expecting me to drop everything for 2 weeks because it's convenient for you. And when I ask for the basic courtesy of being consulted first, you throw your father in my face. You tell me this is why he left. I walked to my front door and opened it. The afternoon sunlight streamed in, bright and indifferent to the drama unfolding in my small apartment. I need you to leave now, Brianna. She stared at me in disbelief. Leave? And take the kids? Yes. Mom, our flight is in less than 3 hours. We can't take 2 kids on a 2-week trip that's supposed to be adults only. The hotel doesn't even allow children under 12. Then I suggest you figure out an alternative, because I am not your fallback plan. I am not your emergency solution. I am your mother, and I deserve to be treated with respect. This is insane. You're actually insane. Maybe I am. Maybe I've finally lost my mind after 64 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. But insane or not, I'm not changing my answer. Take your children and leave my apartment. Brianna's face had gone from red to white. She stood frozen in the middle of my living room, phone buzzing incessantly in her hand, children sleeping peacefully on my couch, completely unprepared for a reality where her mother said no. Derek is going to be furious. Derek's feelings are not my concern. You're ruining his career. His career is not my responsibility. She let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, the kind of sound I remembered from her teenage years when I wouldn't let her go to a party or buy her a new phone. But she was 36 years old now, and this tantrum felt obscene, coming from a grown woman with children of her own. Fine. You know what? Fine. She moved toward the couch and roughly shook Marcus awake. He startled, disoriented, his small face crumpling in confusion. Wake up, Marcus. We're leaving. Grandma doesn't want us here. That's not what I said, and you know it. But Brianna was already picking up Zoe, who immediately started crying at the sudden disruption of her sleep. She grabbed the overstuffed diaper bag, nearly knocking over a lamp in the process, and headed toward the door. When you come to your senses, Mom, don't bother calling. I don't know when I'll be ready to talk to you again. I'll be here when you're ready. But my answer will still be the same. She paused at the door, Zoe wailing in her arms, Marcus clutching at her leg with tearful confusion. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that might have been doubt, or regret, or the beginning of understanding. But then, it was gone, replaced by that hard, defensive shell she had constructed around herself. Wait until Derek hears about this. Wait until I tell everyone what you did, Grandma Evelyn, who refused to babysit her own grandchildren. See how that plays out at the next family gathering. I said nothing. I just stood there, holding the door open, watching as she maneuvered her crying children down the hallway toward the elevator. Marcus looked back at me once, his small face confused and sad, and I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. But I didn't call out to them. I didn't run after them. I didn't change my mind. The elevator doors closed, and they were gone. I shut my apartment door and stood in the silence they had left behind. The couch still held the impressions of their small bodies. The faint smell of baby shampoo lingered in the air. A small toy car, that must have fallen out of Marcus's pocket, sat forgotten on my coffee table. I picked up the car and held it in my palm. It was red, slightly scratched from being played with so much. Marcus loved cars. He could name every make and model by the time he was 3, a talent that his father proudly attributed to his own influence. I wondered if Derek would even notice that his son's favorite toy was missing. I sat down heavily in my armchair, the one I'd bought for myself last year because I finally could. Because for the first time in my life, I had money and time that was entirely my own. Because I had worked for 38 years and saved and sacrificed, and now I deserved to sit in a comfortable chair and read a book or watch television, or simply exist without anyone needing anything from me. The silence in my apartment felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with the weight of what had just happened, the words that had been said, the relationship that might have just fractured beyond repair. My daughter thought I was being difficult. She thought I was selfish. She thought this was the same behavior that drove her father away, as if his abandonment of us had been my fault rather than his choice. But I knew something she didn't know yet, something it had taken me 64 years to learn. Loving someone didn't mean disappearing for them. Being a good mother didn't mean having no boundaries. Being available didn't mean being infinitely exploitable. My phone buzzed, a text from Derek. Thanks a lot for ruining everything. The hotel won't let us cancel. We're out, home. I stared at the message for a long moment. $3,000 for a 2-week vacation at an adults-only resort while they expected me to provide free childcare. The mathematics of their entitlement was staggering. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone and set it face down on the table. The evening passed slowly. I made myself dinner, a simple salad and some leftover soup, and ate it at my small kitchen table. I watched the sun set from my window, the sky turning shades of orange and pink that reminded me of the sunsets I used to watch from the hospital break room during my evening shifts, always through a window, always on borrowed time. I thought about my own mother, gone now for 12 years. She had been a woman of her generation, one who never questioned that her purpose was to serve others. She had raised 5 children, kept an immaculate house, supported my father through his career, and somewhere along the way she had lost herself entirely. In her final years, she used to say that she didn't know who she was anymore, that she had been a mother and a wife for so long that she had forgotten there was ever anything else. I had sworn I wouldn't end up like her, but here I was, 64 years old, and I had spent the last 2 years falling into the exact same trap: free babysitter, convenient helper, always available, never appreciated. The phone rang, not a text this time, but an actual call. My sister Rosa's name appeared on the screen. I answered, knowing what was coming. "Evie, what on earth is going on? Brianna just called me in hysterics saying, 'You kicked her out?' I didn't kick her out. I told her I wouldn't babysit for 2 weeks while she and Derek went on vacation without asking me first." There was a pause on the other end. Rosa was 2 years younger than me, and we had always been close, but she came from the same generation of women who believed that mothers and grandmothers existed to serve. 2 weeks is a long time, Rosa admitted. "But still, Evie, they're your grandchildren." "I know they're my grandchildren. I love them desperately. But Rosa, do you know how many days I've watched them in the past 6 months? I stopped counting after 40. 40 days of babysitting, most of them without being asked in advance, all of them without any acknowledgement that I might have my own plans." "Well, you are retired." "Retirement isn't unemployment, Rosa. It's not just sitting around waiting for someone to need me. I have a life. I have friends. I have things I want to do. I didn't work for 38 years, so I could spend my golden years as unpaid labor for my daughter." Another pause, longer this time. I never thought about it that way. Neither did I, for a long time. But today, when Brianna walked in with those suitcases and that lie about a weekend, something snapped. I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. Rosa was quiet for so long that I thought maybe the call had dropped. Then she spoke again, and her voice was different, softer, more thoughtful. "Remember when Mama used to say that a woman's work is never done?" I remember. I always thought it was just a saying, but it's not, is it? It's a prophecy. We work and we work and we give, and somehow it's never enough. Somehow, there's always someone else who needs something from us. Yes. And by the time we're finally done, we're too tired to remember what we wanted for ourselves. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. Rosa understood. Maybe not completely, but she was trying. "Evie, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I think maybe you did the right thing today, even if it doesn't feel like it." We talked for a while longer, about nothing in particular, the way sisters do when they're trying to heal something without directly addressing it. By the time I hung up, I felt a little lighter, a little less alone in my decision. The days that followed were difficult. Brianna didn't call or text. Derek sent one more angry message about how I had destroyed their vacation before going silent. My phone remained conspicuously quiet, missing the usual requests for help, the last-minute asks, the assumptions disguised as questions. I filled my days with the things I had been putting off. I finished the book I'd been reading for 2 months. I went to my walking group without having to check first if I was needed elsewhere. I met my friends for lunch and stayed as long as I wanted without watching the clock. I booked that trip to Florida to see my college roommate, the one I had canceled 6 months ago. But I also thought about Marcus and Zoe constantly. I wondered if they asked about me. I wondered if they understood why Grandma Evie hadn't seen them lately. Children don't understand adult conflicts. They only know presence and absence. And right now, I was painfully absent. 3 weeks passed before Brianna finally reached out. It wasn't a call or a text. It was an email, formal and stiff, as if she were writing to a business associate rather than her mother. "Mom, I think we need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee on Saturday? Just us, no kids, no Derek. There are some things I need to say." I agreed. Saturday arrived, and I found myself at a small coffee shop in a neutral neighborhood, neither hers nor mine. I arrived early, ordered a chamomile tea, and sat by the window, watching for my daughter. She walked in exactly on time. She looked different, I noticed. Tired, but in a way that suggested she'd been doing some thinking. She ordered a coffee and sat down across from me, without the usual perfunctory hug. "I've been talking to a therapist," she said without preamble. "Derek and I both have. After what happened, after the trip fell apart, and we spent 2 weeks dealing with everything at home instead of being in Seattle, I was so angry at you. But then I started talking to someone, and she made me see some things I didn't want to see. I said nothing. I just waited. She asked me a question. She asked, "When was the last time you called your mother just to see how she was, without needing anything from her?" And I couldn't answer. I sat there for like 5 minutes trying to think of one time in the past year, and I couldn't. I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been wound tight for weeks. And then she asked me another question. If your mother had done to you what you did to her, showing up unannounced, expecting you to drop everything for 2 weeks, how would you have reacted? And I knew. I would have been furious. I would have felt completely disrespected. Brianna's eyes were wet now. She wasn't crying yet, but she was close. I used to think you were just being difficult. That's what Dad always said, that you made everything harder than it needed to be. And I believed him because it was easier than believing he was wrong. It was easier than admitting that maybe he left because he was selfish, not because you were impossible. Brianna, let me finish, please. She took a shaky breath. I've been treating you the way he treated you. Like you exist to make my life easier. Like your time and your needs don't matter as much as mine. And when you finally said no, I threw him in your face. I said the cruelest thing I could think of because I was angry that you weren't giving me what I wanted. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold from the coffee cup, but her grip was firm. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for every time I assumed you would be available without asking. I'm sorry for treating you like a resource instead of a person. The tears came then, for both of us. We sat in that coffee shop, hands intertwined, crying quietly while the other customers politely pretended not to notice. I love you, Brianna, I finally said. I never stopped loving you, even when you hurt me. I know, and that makes it worse, somehow. Because you kept loving me even when I was awful, and I didn't even appreciate it. We talked for 2 more hours. She told me about the therapy sessions, about the things she was learning about herself, about her patterns. She told me about a difficult conversation she'd had with Derek, who was struggling to accept that his mother-in-law wasn't an unlimited resource for free childcare. She told me about Marcus, who had been asking for Grandma Evie every day. He doesn't understand why you haven't come to see him. I didn't know what to tell him. Tell him Grandma loves him very much. Tell him I'll see him soon, if you're okay with that. Of course I'm okay with that. But Mom, it has to be different now. No more last-minute drops. No more assuming you're available. I need to ask, and you need to be able to say no without me making you feel guilty about it. Can you really do that? She paused, considering the question honestly. I'm learning. It's hard because I'm realizing how much of my own behavior I learned from Dad. He always expected women to accommodate him, and I guess I absorbed that. But I'm trying to unlearn it. For my sake, for your sake, and for Marcus and Zoe. I don't want to raise kids who think it's okay to treat people the way I treated you. We left the coffee shop with plans to have dinner the following week. A family dinner, with the kids and Derek, but also with clear expectations. I would see my grandchildren because I loved them and wanted to be part of their lives, not because I was obligated to provide free labor. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were slip-ups, moments when Brianna fell back into old patterns, and I had to remind her of our new understanding. There were awkward dinners with Derek, who still seemed to resent me for the ruined vacation. There were times when I had to say no, and felt the old guilt creeping back in. But there was also change, real, measurable change. Brianna started calling me just to talk. No agenda, no requests. She asked in advance when she needed babysitting and accepted my answer either way. She began to see me as a person with my own life, not just as a grandmother whose purpose was to serve. And I changed, too. I stopped waiting for someone to need me before I felt valuable. I took that trip to Florida and stayed for 3 weeks instead of the original one. I joined a book club and a pottery class and a volunteer organization that helped elderly patients in the hospital where I used to work. I filled my life with things I had chosen for myself, not things that had been expected of me. I still watch Marcus and Zoe regularly, but now it's because I want to, not because I have to. Now, when I agree to babysit, it's a gift I'm choosing to give, not an obligation being demanded of me. And that distinction, small as it might seem, has made all the difference. Last week, Marcus made me a card at preschool. It was covered in stickers and scribbled hearts, and in his careful, wobbly handwriting, he had written, "I love Grandma Evie. She is special. Special. Not convenient. Not available. Special. Not convenient." I put that card on my refrigerator, right at eye level, where I can see it every morning when I make my coffee in the expensive machine my daughter once tried to use as currency for my time. I am 64 years old. I spent 38 years taking care of other people because it was my job, and then I spent 2 more years taking care of other people because I thought it was my duty. But now, finally, I am taking care of myself, and I have learned that there is nothing selfish about that. In fact, it might be the most important thing I've ever done. Because when I said no to my daughter that afternoon, I wasn't rejecting my family. I was reclaiming myself. I was teaching my daughter that women don't exist solely to serve. I was showing my grandchildren that boundaries are not barriers to love, but the foundation of respect. I was honoring my own mother's memory by refusing to disappear the way she did. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love less. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop accepting treatment you don't deserve. And when you respect yourself, others learn to respect you too. That's the truth I discovered at 64. Standing in my living room with a diaper bag full of evidence that my daughter had planned to use me without asking. It's the truth I carry with me now, every day, as I live the life I spent decades earning the right to live. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you know what it feels like to be treated as convenient rather than valuable, I want you to know something. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to be more than what other people need from you. And if they really love you, they'll learn to respect that. It might take time. It might take tears and difficult conversations and uncomfortable silences. But the people who truly love you will eventually understand that you are not a resource to be depleted. You are a person to be cherished. That's the gift I finally gave myself. And it's the gift I hope you'll give yourself too. If you related to my story, let me know by leaving a like. I'd love to hear where you're listening from, so drop your location in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and check out the videos appearing on your screen right now. I'll see you in the next one.